So boom, we got Hugh Hefner here. I mentioned this video or referenced it the other day in another video. And it's Hugh Hefner on the D Cavett show. I'm not going to say the name because they might try and, clip your boy. But I did my due diligence, so we will identify the feminists at the end of the video more than likely and what they had going on throughout their life. But this was on March 26, 1970 as far as the air date. So we going to get to it. We going to watch it. We going to react.
I would like to introduce now two ladies who I'm sure, well, I know everyone is aware by this time that there are a lot of women in this country who feel that they're being pushed around, and they've become very vocal. They call themselves the Women's Liberation Movement, and we have two representatives from that movement here tonight. They're both writers. Susan Brown Miller had a piece in the Sunday Times a couple of weeks back, and Sally Kempton is the other lady, and I would like you to meet those two ladies. Maybe we can find out what the women are all upset about. Will you welcome them, please? Are you Sally?
Yes.
Yes. Well, you've brought cigarettes. Could I not light it for you?
No.
Okay. Just a little joke, you see.
Would you like to not light it for me?
Is it true
It's so great that we live in a time where you can't just smoke inside everywhere. That shit used to be so horrible.
that you travel in pairs for some reason, or is this just a
There is a political reason why we came tonight together.
political reason?
Yes.
Oh, you want to leap right into that?
Sure. The women's liberation movement says sisterhood is powerful, and that means women together. And women's liberation is hot copy this season. And
Yeah, every magazine has an article.
Right, every magazine has an article. All the shows kind of want to see a women's liberationist in the flesh. And our movement doesn't want to create stars or celebrities. So when we get an offer, we feel we should come, in a pair.
Oh, well, stars are created in pairs. I mean,
Right, but also we want to be crosstalk teams. I mean, we want to, answer questions for each other and support each other generally.
okay.
Which is,
What do you think men are doing wrong?
They're in charge. Yeah. And they oppress us as women. They won't let us be. And Hugh Hefner is my enemy.
Oh, is Hef your enemy? We really set you up tonight, didn't we?
we've been watching.
Even in the audience, I think. I get a certain.
Well,
I think we have more than a few.
I'm sure you must have some
of the lib
friends
people
out
here in
there.
the
Well,
audience.
if that's true, then there are sisters. We didn't bring them. It's just that women's liberation is growing every day.
You didn't stack the audience, if you'll pardon the expression. Now you two are
I didn't get that joke. Was it like a boob reference or something? I don't know. Let me know in the comments if you got it.
successful. You're Sally Kempton, are you?
Right.
You're successful writers. Have your careers been stood in the way of by your sex?
Well, Susan should really answer that question because mine hasn't for various reasons, except psychologically, which is another issue.
It's good you came in
Yeah.
Tuesday, then, if
Right.
yours has.
Right. I never wrote anything till I was 28 years old. And I never dared to allow myself to believe that I had ambition and that I should be a writer. I worked at Esquire magazine for 2 years as a researcher. I worked at Newsweek magazine for 2 years as a researcher, and I'd go in periodically to my bosses and say, I'd like to do more, I'd like to write. And they'd say, oh, you got your hair set today, isn't that lovely? Things like that. And they never took my ambition seriously. When I was 28, I read Betty Friedan's book, The Feminine Mystique, and I saw myself on every page, and I knew what she was talking about. And I knew that I really wanted to do something, and for me it was writing, so I started to do it. And, I've had some small success at it. That's all.
So help me understand this. So the big bad man at the job is not letting you write. You telling him you want to write, he's brushing you off. You read a book, it inspires you to write. This woman had a career as a media writer. So that book made you begin to write because she said she hadn't wrote till she was 28. And when you were writing, where were you putting this stuff at? Were you pitching it to the man and then the man found out that you could write and then put you in a position? Or were you not writing shit and you was waiting for him to give you the green light? It's very confusing and it's not straightforward as far as how she put it. So I'm very confused.
Well, we're really not successful. I mean, we're just doing something that ordinary
yeah.
guys do all the time. There's nothing exceptional about being a freelance writer or a reporter.
Yeah.
All kinds of mediocre people do that. It's just because we're women, somehow, it seems very special.
Well, what is it you want done, if you could wave a magic wand now, that would release you from the yoke of this oppression that you all talk about? What would do it quickly? Is it a whole change of attitude in the Western world?
Yeah. It's a change in education, really. Women are brought up in really hundreds of ways. I mean, from the time they're 2 and 3 years old, to be cute and coquettish and intellectually unserious, to seduce people instead of saying what they want. Mm-hmm. I think it would be, what we would really like is for there to be no necessity for seduction in the world at all. And particularly for there to be no necessity for women to seduce men to get what they want.
Well, now, there's some of you, and I find it hard to not say some of you, because there are different voices speaking for the women's liberation movement, who reject men altogether. They won't sit in the same room with a man if they can avoid it. Are you two of those ladies? And if so, what are we doing here?
I think we're probably more optimistic about the ability of men to change. We think there's going to be a struggle, and we don't think that men are going to give up their power and privilege easily, because they benefit from oppressing women. They really do. Hefner has built an empire based on oppressing women.
In 1970, they clapped for that. That crowd do not believe that. That crowd does not believe this man employing models for adult entertainment is oppression. They don't believe that. But they're clapping anyway. The one thing that you have to remember about women is that they are professional victims. Like, not professional in the sense of, oh, they're getting paid, like a literal definition, but like pro level at it. Like, they are the best at being victims when it comes to everything. Like, they love to blame everybody for everything. So when you understand that, you could look at this and understand, like, even back then, women would see other women making a choice that it's a completely free choice that they have to go and work for this man and get naked and make good money and have it publicized. They know exactly what is going to happen. And they're making a choice to be a part of that process for money. And when you look at the present day, women still have the same mentality, because guess what happens? Women like Mia Khalifa and Lana Rose participate in the adult industry, and they profit heavily from it. They build brands from it. And then they down talk it once they get out of it. They play victim when they get out of it. And they still use their brand that they built from being a 304 on these guys' platforms. They got them a lot of money. They still use their sexuality to get money even after that. See, what we're talking about now is the evolution. She's just talking in the 70s. Now, when you look at a pimp, they call that human trafficking. When you think of human trafficking, typically you think of taking, you think of somebody kidnapping a woman who is unwilling and all this stuff, just an unwilling participant being forced into sex work. When you look at pimping, like, a lot of that is by choice. A lot of the women know exactly what it is. They actually choose. They pimp and stuff like that. But as far as the laws changing, the laws have changed to where they don't see it that way. The justice system doesn't see it that way. So you, as a pimp that manages willing 304s, you, in the eyes of the law, are the same as a kidnapper. You are the same as a kidnapper. When in reality, those aren't the same thing. It's not the same action. So we're going to get back to it, but that's something I just want you to notice. Back then, these women are being victimized. That's the picture that they're painting, even though the women are willing participants. Now, in present day, with all of the media shit, the culture shift and the cancellations and Me Too's and stuff in the past 15, 20 years. I ain't even going to say 20. It's really been 15. It's really been 15 years for real. But now everything has shifted to believing this type of narrative. It's shifted to believing the women who willingly participate in the sex industry are victims. Even though they are making the choice themselves, they are profiting from it themselves, they are not being forced, they are victims. They are looked at as victims, and guess what? Women see that opportunity, and when a well runs dry or shit, they don't like how shit is going, they go into victim mode, and guess what? People get punished for it in some cases, and then they get rewarded and coddled for it. That's where society has went since this.
You know, the day.
One lady that we spoke to who's a member of your movement would not come on tonight with you, Mr. Hefner, because she said it would be like putting Stokely Carmichael on with George Wallace. I don't know which of you is flattered by that, but
Feels like Wallace, eh? That's,
I don't know which of you is which, but have you had this reaction before tonight?
yes, I think Playboy's been singled out along with, the Miss America contest and some other things as, as the extreme example of what the new feminists feel is the wrong image for women. But, having been described as an oppressor, can I respond just a little bit?
All right.
I'm more in sympathy than perhaps, the girls realize with...
Women.
I'm sorry.
Yes, I'm 35.
Than the ladies realize. I use girls referring to women of all ages.
You should stop.
You want to be called a boy.
Oh, I see. Okay. I always felt it was complimentary, but
Never thought you'd have your mouth washed out for saying girls.
no, that's right.
That's a very important
I'd
thing.
never thought of girl as being, but I think there's validity to it. I think there's validity. I'd never thought of it as being, condescending.
That's because your magazine
All right,
has
but
an
wait,
image of women at an arrested development.
Well, let me respond. Let me respond for just a moment, and then we'll
May I
really
just say
kick
that
it
the
back
ladies
and
in your
forth.
magazine have the opposite of arrested development?
Now here. Now, first of all,
Sorry.
the girls in the magazine are admittedly young. The average age of our male reader is 26, so there's a certain logic to that.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of my attitude on the feminist movement as it exists now, I think that women over generations and centuries have indeed been oppressed. I think there's no question about it.
Yeah.
It's only a relatively short time that they've had the vote, and a short time before that they were allowed to own property. I think there are still many areas in society in which they do not have equal job opportunity. One of the thrusts of the feminist movement is for better abortion laws. I think Playboy has done as much as any mass media in terms of trying to accomplish exactly that. But I take issue and separate in this one rather fundamental area. There is usually a parallel made between female emancipation and racial equality. And
Oh, brother, here we go.
I don't think it's the same thing. Even though the feminist movement grew out of the civil rights, the current feminist movement grew out of the civil rights business. For this reason, I don't think that the color of a man's skin is any more important than whether he is blonde or brunette, blue-eyed or brown-eyed. I think whether you are male or female is the beginning of who you are as a human being. I think it's important, and I think that it is important emotionally as well as physically. I think there are differences, and I think there should continue to be differences. I think what we want to try to do is find roles in society that are not as limiting as they've been in the past, and they have been far more limiting for women than men, admittedly, but very limiting for both in the past. I hope we're going to evolve into a society in which the broadest spectrum of opportunities exist for both men and women, but I think that to begin with, we are, I like very much Mary Calderon's.
So we're going to get to some race talking points very briefly. The first thing, of course, when it comes to white people, color doesn't matter. It's the fucking rainbow is all perfect and shit. Everything is good because it doesn't affect them. And yeah, it can sound positive, but it's really not, because we talking about 1970 where, yeah, segregation ended 2 years ago, but it's still fucking crazy in 1970 for a lot of reasons that I don't have to go over. So, yeah, there's a bigger difference between men and women. Okay, that's cool, because you put a black fucking woman on Playboy. That's cool. But anyways, the second thing is, that's one thing that you won't hear a lot of people in a black manosphere, because the white manosphere, they on some other shit. They just fucking whatever. But you won't hear a lot of black people in a black manosphere say anything about how feminists, kind of hijack a lot of black movements or piggyback on a lot of black movements and things of that nature. A good example, and I'm not going to say that like this was made for black people or anything like that, but when you look at DEI, we are being branded as far as black people as like DEI. Like that's supposed to be us. Like we're supposed to be the faces of DEI right now. It's getting taken away. So many black people upset because they don't know what the fuck is going on, because the media is trying to make us think that it's our problem because we are like the fucking mascots of fucking oppression in the country, valid for a valid reason. But when you actually look at who it benefits, and you could just look at the screen, I'm not reading none of this shit, it benefits white women the most. I heard somebody, and I think it was Dr. Claude Anderson, I think he was on a Breakfast Club, and I don't even think it was recent, I don't know. But somebody said, we are fifth. We are fifth when it comes to benefiting from DEI. We are not even in the top 3 when it comes to DEI. So that shit don't really benefit us like motherfuckers say it do. And back to the mascot shit, when stuff happens, like Kendrick does the Super Bowl and stuff like that, you'll have a politician tweet out some like negative racist shit like, oh, DEI halftime show and shit like that, which I'll be honest with you, I think is funny. I think that's funny. But that shit benefits white women the most. White women. It's not us. Don't stop fucking pointing at us.
A comment in a recent Playboy interview in which he said, she's less interested in women's rights than human rights. I think that it's...
Would you like to respond, Susan?
I certainly would. The role that you have selected for women is degrading to women because you choose to see women as sex objects, not as full human beings.
Well, it obviously
hold
is
on
degrading...
now. The day that you...
It obviously is
I
degrading
want to
to a
say,
lot
I
of
haven't
women.
finished. The day that you are willing to come out here with a cottontail attached to your rear end...
He was smoking that good shit.
He has made the degradation of women a condition of employment in the Playboy clubs around the country. They have to get into these ridiculous costumes which deny their humanity and their femininity. You make them look like animals. Yes, women aren't bunnies. They're not rabbits. They're human beings.
All right. The Playboy symbol, the rabbit, of course, and the reason for having bunnies in the clubs, the symbol was originally a male figure, and it was picked quite innocently and simply some 16 years ago because we felt it was a rather playful and sexual symbol. The fact that the girls are dressed in costumes is no more complex than that, and the girls obviously don't find it degrading, or we wouldn't have as many working with us. In addition,
that's not true.
just 1 minute. In addition, I know that there are a great many women who feel as you do, but there are also 1 out of every 4 readers of the magazine today is female, so there are obviously a lot of other women too. In terms of degrading and wearing a bunny tail, the parallel that's usually made is, why don't you create a women's magazine with nude men? Because there's some kind of a notion that, taking the clothes off is a degrading concept.
Hey, Helen Gurley Brown wants to put a
Yes, I
man
know
in
she does, and I think she may
Cosmopolitan.
do
What do
it.
you think of that and her?
Well, that's another symptom of the same decadent problem, right?
Is
I
she
mean,
just a female hef?
Well, I don't know. I'm sort of...
No,
she's not. I mean, Helen Gurley Brown, at least, was the first person who ever said that it was okay for a woman to be single up into her 40s and 50s. One has to give her that. But she runs a magazine for women who want to know how to get men, just as Mr. Hefner runs a magazine for men who want to seduce women. And we don't think that's a proper, that's a sole relationship between men and women, or even certainly not the most important one. And maybe that's the reason that all these things about male impotence and stuff like that you and Dr. May were talking about earlier has been going on.
I wonder if we could
Or
get...
hassle. In other words, if you have a relationship with somebody, why do you have to form a big thing? I mean, some guys you have crummy relationships with, some you don't. I mean, some of them are great, some of them aren't. Some of them look at you as a sex object, fine. So the ones that like to talk to you.
But those aren't the ones.
No, I mean the ones
that's
who like to both go to bed with you and talk to you. You do both of those things. The ones who like to make music and talk to you and go to bed with you and write or whatever you do, draw. You do all those things. I mean, I don't see where the problem is. It's just maybe because I don't see what you're talking about yet. but I don't see the problem yet.
And even though that was pretty nonsensical, like as far as the context, it just goes to show you everybody wasn't jiving with what these chicks were saying. Even though, I keep it a beam with you, I could tell. Honest signals, man. She got a choker on, the stuff she is talking about, man. 304 for 1970, keeping it a beam with you.
I think we need another show on the subject. We have to pause. We'll be back in a moment. Dr. May, you've been very quiet and patient.
Yes, well, I've been thinking and listening. I very much agree with most of what you've been saying. And I do think that Playboy has treated women as an accessory, like the tie or the shirt or whatever one wears. Now, that's what I was trying to say a little while ago. Now, and it's not just that this is happening in the modern period, Mr. Hefner. In the Middle Ages, women were terrifically powerful. Anne of Aquitaine and these queens led armies, and 70, one conquered another land and married again. This is a period of women's power.
We got to stop that shit. We got to stop the lead army shit and all that stuff, man. Listen, millions and millions of people died in World War II. Tons and tons, in World War II alone, tons of people die in war. Most of the people battling are men. Most of the leaders throughout the history of the earth when it comes to violence are men. And even then, when a picture gets painted to what's wrong with violence and stuff like that, they want to choose the bear over the man because we so violent. So we got this image, right? One thing that is true when we get to talking about warfare and leading societies and stuff like that, that's men's thing. Let's not try and repaint history like women have a rich history of one leading societies, because they don't. They don't. Just because you got Queen Elizabeth, Cleopatra, and a handful of other tokens, and you got the chick who is what is it? Fucking Scandinavia or whatever the fuck she leading one of them countries now. Like, you know, it's females running certain countries right now, but let's not act like it's a rich history of that, number one. And also, number two, as far as them leading like fucking troops and soldiers and stuff like that, let's not do that either. Let's not act like there's a rich history of that. Like, you can't name 50 chicks who led battalions or anything like that. Like, just cut it out. And even if you can name 50, I can name 1,000, and then still, I could probably name 1,000 for every one. For every one that you name out of those 50, I could probably name 50,000, bro. So let's cut the bullshit. All this is some 1970s pander bear action. Like, just, I want to appeal to you before I get to whatever point that I'm going to say. I want to pander to you, make y'all feel like I'm really on y'all side by saying some bullshit.
Now, agreeing with most of what you say, let me put in one qualification, that I think the difference between men and women ought to be capitalized on and not swept under the rug. For example, we are men and you are women, and the best identity. See, when I work with a patient, she's a woman, I have to get her over all these subdued, docile feelings. I mean, it does make a human being. But also,
You're a rare psychiatrist.
What'd you say?
I said you are a rare psychiatrist.
Well,
Yes.
I hope so.
Yeah.
But
you know, there are very many strict Freudians who tell their women patients that they're not accepting their female role. They can only find salvation
I don't
through
think I've
housework
used
and
that
motherhood.
in
Right.
40 years. That's been longer than I've been practicing. But look, let me put in one point. It's the old French idea, vive la différence. I think what you ought to do is not try to be the same as men. After all, I don't think most of us have done a very good job with our lives. But
I am no fool. That man is trying to charm her. He is downplaying the role of men. He is downplaying the success of men within society in the 70s, or just period, whatever, so that he can appeal to her, so that he can get on her side. It's really nasty, wormish work.
ought to try to affirm your, what you are as women. And I think the mistake of the women's liberation movement is where they want to be just the same as men, which I'm sure you don't, but they throw out the baby with the bathwater, which is the differences that are in the personality of each, and the well, I still believe in vive la différence. Not at all because la différence makes anybody superior to anybody else, but because life is tremendously more interesting if there are two sexes in it.
Is either of you ladies married?
Yes,
Here,
I-
here.
You are. Now, some of you are really against marriage completely.
Yes. Yeah, I think most of us feel that the marriage laws are very discriminatory.
Oh man. Take us back. Take us back. Oh my goodness. 1970, boy. Oh my goodness, man. She said, oh man. Shit, I don't know what the laws was back then, but this shit that's going on now, very, very oppressive to men and very biased against men, biased to women, to where they benefit in most situations. The court favors the woman. Just real ironic to hear that. Let's see what she got to say.
Against women.
Except in California with alimony, apparently.
Well,
Would you
Well,
accept alimony if you were divorced?
no.
You wouldn't.
But I would think that a woman who spent her whole life being a housewife and mother should. I think that in such cases, alimony is really the price that men pay for women's oppression.
See, that's evil talk right there. That's number one. That's evil talk. Number two, I do get that she said she wouldn't take it. But number three, how are the laws oppressive in 1970 towards women as far as the marriage laws when alimony existed and they were the ones getting awarded alimony? Like, I know for sure it's gotten worse since the 70s, but if that shit was already in place, like what is the oppression for real? Like what was the oppression at that point? Like, you just talking. And I don't know if I said it yet. I need you to recognize these women, when I did my research, they are labeled as radical feminists, radical second wave feminists.
How do you explain the Margaret Chase Smiths and the Helen Gurley Browns and the Bess Meyersons and who have somehow fought through the
Yes,
system
well,
and gotten
society
there?
always allows a few to get through. You know, there are always loopholes.
Could you speak as if there were a conspiracy? They said, let's
Oh,
let
yeah,
these few through,
well,
and then
yes,
these
I
other
think
women will
there
get
is a
back in their place.
conspiracy. I really do.
But not a conscious one. You don't think that I go around consciously oppressing women,
I
do you?
don't know if you do. I don't think so, watching your show. You know, I really
Oh.
wouldn't think. You seem to like intelligent women, and you never seem to be afraid to have strong women on your show. I mean, you've had marvelous intellectual discussions with Beverly Sills, Shirley
Yeah,
Chisholm.
but that's because I'm
right?
weak and like to be dominated.
You don't believe that. No, you're not. No, you're confident of your masculinity. Right?
Say that
I'll say
again.
that louder, right? You're
Say-
confident of your masculinity.
I wanted to get that
Yeah.
out, so that well, I'll hear it. Gee, we need another show on this. I'm afraid we have opened so many cans of worms here. I wish we could get to them. That isn't aimed at any of my guests. This turned into a roast Hefner evening. I'm sorry about that.
Dick, I'm going
You'll get
talk about that later.
So that's the end of the interview. I'm going to go over what happened with the women in a moment, but I got to make an important point that I did not make through the whole video. And it's funny that, like, you know, back then it's just so oppressive, right? It's so oppressive. And I already went over the parallels to today to where women can just flick on the, oh, this is so oppressing, even though I'm profiting from it. And I did it willfully. And these guys are predators. They could flip that switch immediately when it comes to this sex industry stuff. But it's so funny that what was once looked at as oppressive, as far as like women being objectified and, you know, being in these magazines, being naked, wearing bunny costumes, even though, you know, Adam West wearing a Batman costume, that's not oppressive. But yeah, it's oppressive to women wearing bunny suits in some way. But yeah, all of this shit is oppressive back then, right? It's oppressive as far as women showing their bodies, getting money for it. Now it's empowering. That's where feminism has went. You have things like the slut walk. That is where feminism has went. Feminism has went to a place where sexual liberation is women empowerment. And sexual liberation is basically just hedonism to the max. Smashing 800 dudes in your life as a woman. being a stripper, getting paid on OnlyFans to crack your anus cavity open. So that's how things have evolved. Now, let's get into who these women are and what happened. So we're going to discuss the younger chick first. Her name was Sally Kempton. She was an American journalist. She passed away, unfortunately, in June 10th, 2023. So she was married to a movie producer. So I'm not going to read the screen. You could pause it and read it if you want, but I'll just summarize it. So basically, feminism was a phase for her. She had the movie producer husband. She described her husband, and she mentioned that she was married on the show, but she described her husband publicly as a male supremacist. They eventually divorced, and she basically said, she was done with relationships for the most part. Later in life, she became a spiritual teacher, but she got really deep into that type of stuff, Eastern spirituality and stuff like that. But one of the things that she said, I'm going to read it. She said, in 2001, Kempton said of her move to spiritual focus that she was a feminist for only a year, when she realized she had turned from radical self-blame to radical blaming of others. The truth was, I was responsible for my life. It wasn't any guy's fault. That is very mature of her. We will move on. Now, when you look at this is the other one, Susan Brown Miller, the main one who was talking. She is still alive. She is 90. Now, you could pause and read this if you want. All it says is that she describes herself as a single woman. And as of 2018, she still hasn't been married. And this right here just goes over some of her career. There's some stuff that happened in 99 as far as something she released. She really peaked in the 60s and stuff like that. But, the point that I'm going to drive home at the end of this video is that these women were wigtail, women going their own way. Before men going their own way was even a thing, man. They went their own way and they didn't get married. The one got married and she said, relationships not for me. She got into spirituality, but at least she matured and said, you know what? Yeah, this ain't that. Like this, I really didn't believe in that stuff. And, I shouldn't be blaming other people for the way my life is turning out. It's really on me and my shoulders. Kind of like how old girl that we looking at right now said, or excuse me, old woman, because, she checked Hugh Hefner for saying girl. But, yeah, she said, the man wouldn't let me write. The man wouldn't let me write. But I read a book and then I started writing. Like, if you weren't writing before that book and you were waiting on a man to give you the permission to write, that's the issue. But, she never gave context on that. So that's why I'm speculating about that. But ultimately, the main point of this video, this is a blast from the past, show you how a lot has changed since then and just giving you a look at what, feminism looked like in the 70s, like when it was going as far as the second wave and all of this shit that got destroyed to where now, families, the family unit is facing the consequences. Married men who are getting divorced by women who have no real reason to divorce them but get all the incentive. These are the consequences of this feminism that they were pushing. Hugh Hefner is supposed to be the enemy, but if you ask feminists right now, they would still probably say that he's the enemy. Of course, he's passed, but they'll say anybody that's a male running anything porn related is probably the enemy and an oppressor and stuff like that. But it's so great getting the money when they're working for these guys, getting their clout up, getting their Instagram up, and then when they get the chance, running their own OnlyFans off the brand that they built under these guys who own these companies. They're so empowered once they get in a position to run everything themselves. And guess who is not a oppressor? The people who run OnlyFans. They are not oppressors. Even though they're men, they are not oppressors. So that's what it comes with. That's all. Let me know your thoughts. I'm gone.